Welcome to the Perfect Life Awakening Show, hosted by Royce Morales. Royce has been a transformational facilitator, teaching groundbreaking, spiritually based courses for more than 4 decades. She is the author of 3 books about her teachings. Join Royce as she takes you on a journey into how to live your best life and find your true purpose through discovering the origins of subconscious, disempowering notions and releasing them. She talks with experts and inspiring people just like you who learned to trust their intuitive inner wisdom, which led to life-changing shifts. Today, her guests live an empowered existence and are helping change the world to a higher consciousness place based on truth and love. You deserve to awaken to, align with, and embody your true self and live a life filled with love. Transform yourself from triggered to empowered and create your perfect life. Here is your host, Royce Morales.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. I'm excited, as always, to welcome my guest today. But before I even introduce everyone to Edy, I want to just talk a little bit, because our theme today is about loss and what it does and how it keeps us stuck. But what I wanted to mention is that one of the things I talk about in my courses is that we all experience loss from the minute we arrive in a physical body, because nothing is permanent in this physical world. And yet we're so attached to everything physical that it's just probably the most difficult thing for us to deal with. We can't, it's devastating to us. And the letting go process can take years or, from what I've seen, lifetimes. So it reshapes our world. It alters how we see ourselves. It alters how we see everyone. It alters how we see life. And what I've seen and what my guest has also seen, which is very exciting, is that within grief, there is space for renewal. There's space for growth. There's space for transformation. And again, life is a journey of dealing with loss, and life is a journey of self-discovery and growth that can coexist with loss. And I think the sad part, and I'm sure my guest will talk about this too, we've been taught to not fully feel our emotions, especially grief. We're told, oh, just get over it. Or haven't you mourned long enough yet? It's been 2 years, So by not feeling everything to a complete point or a complete experience, getting it all out in some way, it stays stuck in us. And then it gets even more powerful. And the next time we experience loss, it's even bigger. So, by the way, I just wanted to mention something she'll be mentioning too. We're not talking just about death. We're talking about anything that goes away. I had an experience this morning, interestingly enough, where I always sleep with my cell phone under my pillow. And I got up this morning because I want to know what time it is, right? Got up this morning, couldn't find it. Started to freak out. Oh my God, it's gone. I'm turning the light on. I'm looking under the bed. I'm looking everywhere. I'm literally freaking out because that's how attached I am, or we are, to that little device, because it has everything we need in it. Calendar, notes, everything is in that thing. And when I finally did find it, which was interesting, it was tucked under my blanket, not my pillow. It was like, oh, such a sense of relief. But it really triggered the feeling that we all have when something goes away. And it's like we can't stop it. We can't deal with it. What are we going to do? Oh my God, my life is ruined. All of that stuff that happens. So let me introduce Edy to you. Edy Nathan, MA, licensed psychotherapist, and LCSWR, specializes in helping people deal with grief, and she uses all kinds of techniques: breathwork, guided imagery, ritual, storytelling, and she knows that grief is a powerful tool of self-discovery, as I said before, and it hits us all in different ways. Everyone gets hit in different ways, but socially, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. For over 2 decades, she has been exploring the complexity and depth of loss and grief for healing, so that people can heal and have some self-discovery from this process. because it is transformative. Trans grief Grief transforms how we love, how we move through the world, and how we heal. And she believes that grief is not something to overcome, but something to live alongside. And those are her words. I thought that was very profound. And whether it's fresh or you've carried it for years, understanding grief's presence is the first step toward integrating it into your life. The other thing she said, which I think is really beautiful, is there's no right way or wrong way to grieve. There are ways to carry it differently. So welcome, Edy. I'm so glad you're here.
It's great to be here, and I resonated with so much of what you said in terms of that cell phone, the cell phone,
Yes.
and that relationship to the cell phone is an interesting one, and I actually liken it to the way that we as little ones, when we're learning how to be differentiated and we're learning to detach from the mother, or the wholeness of what that mother represents, and that primal relationship, and that when we can't find the mother, that we go into this kind of panic, and where is she, and then there are the tears of that child. I need to find my mom, and the yearning and the crying. And I think at times that the loss of the cell phone, or it ca- th- that there is that sense, that reminder of an earlier loss, because have
Yes.
become so attached to it. Is the container, it is the holder of our lives, it is the way that we communicate, it is the way that we reach out for help. It is the way that we might calm our nervous systems by just looking down and getting ourselves away from the noise. And so it was really an apt way of bringing us into this discussion about loss.
It's funny. I always have something happen right before a show that's just perfect timing for what we're going to talk about. So that's great. Very
Yeah,
interesting. Yes. That mother
yeah,
loss, that separation, that feeling like, where is she? It's
that's right.
huge. It's
That's right.
very
And that
true.
feeling of separation, that feeling of, okay, like, am I losing my mind? And of course, in the child's mind, that may not, that they may not have the language, but it doesn't mean that their nervous systems are not experiencing the impulse of just an abject fear or terror. And that's what grief can bring on. It can bring on
Yeah.
emotions and feelings that we may not even have words for, Royce.
Mhm. Yeah.
The words are so important in terms of what we are feeling, what's going on for us, and how there might be a repetition in our minds of what's wrong with me, what's wrong with me, why aren't I better? And
Mm.
within grief, whether it's the loss of a loved one, or it is the losses that we incur in our lives. And you brought that up because it's not just about the loss of a loved one. It can be about the losses of personal, social, sexual, even identities.
Mhm.
And so it's looking at grief as a kind of an essential part of our development that starts from the time the umbilical cord is cut.
Yes. Yeah. We lost that safety of the womb and all of a sudden we're on
Yeah,
our own. Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
Very
That's right.
triggering.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what you said is really important. And the way that I explain it is it symbolizes so much to us. And what it really symbolizes is loss of ourselves. Every time we lose something out there, it's like, oh, I could lose myself. That's the same thing. Oh my gosh. So it's very, very triggering. So before we get in depth about all this, I want to ask you, how did you get started on this journey? How did you get attracted to this field, dealing with loss and grief?
You know how you opened up and you said, sometimes right before a show, something happens, something comes to you, and then
Yeah.
that becomes your opener, right? So It came to me. It wasn't like I don't think that you choose to work with grief. I think that it shows up, it knocks on your door, and it says, "Okay, you need to start to pay attention." Now, it came to me at a very, very young age. I was
Mm.
probably like 1.5 or 2, and it was just knocking, and what was it? It was about saving animals, and it was about
Oh,
walking down the street and seeing homeless people, or just wanting to help, wanting to save, seeing loss, and and I saw the world through a lens then that um, had innocence and wisdom all at the same time,
mm,
and I
mhm.
realized, though, that the family that I was born into was not going to be able to tolerate this w world view at such a young age, and so I think that we're all born, if you will, with this magical Buddha, and we see the world with wonder and joy, and every color is nuanced and alive, and we learn what our families of origin will and won't tolerate, and what we might need to tuck away or forget, not remember. And so I had to take that Buddha that I think we're all, I'm using the Buddha metaphor, but just that beginner's mind, if you will, Shoshin, which is a beautiful term, um, and put it somewhere. And the realization of having to put some life force of mine away was the opening to my conversation with grief and with loss.
Mm. We sound like we have the same childhood. Yes, I had that same thing. I used to walk down the street and find birds and rescue them, and animals and
Yes.
people.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I
And
think
then
most
it
children
wasn't
feel that.
until years later, when I had a partner and we were very involved, and he taught me about love, he really did. And then, um, a year into that partnership, he was diagnosed with, cancer, and a year later, he was gone.
Oh, wow.
And and I was 27 and really at a loss. And anything that I had not dealt with and the things that had been buried began to just come up, and I was flooded. And I wasn't just flooded with Paul's death. I was flooded with all of the things that I had put away or shut down, my little Buddha, and had to start to heal. I didn't even know what healing meant. All I knew was that the people who were saying, "Don't worry, you're young, you're gonna find somebody else," they were not helping.
Right.
And the people who were saying, "You're gonna get over this," they weren't helping, because uh, it was my life, and I wasn't gonna get over this loss. Maybe I had to find languaging, and it was really his dying that got me into an exploration around what is grief, and how do we talk about it, and what languaging do I want to use, and it just exploded. I went back to school, and I wrote a thesis on grief and creativity, and it just became my life's work.
Mm. Wow. Yes, as life's work often lands in one's lap, whatever we're supposed to do just shows up. That's great.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right.
So, how would you? This might be a silly question, but how do you define loss? How would you, if somebody said to you, "What is loss?" How would you define that?
Hmm. When people come into my office, I really believe that we have this overarching theme of grief, that there's
Mhm.
grief there. But if I said to somebody who's pretty much brand new, "So what are you grieving?" They're gonna look at me like I'm nuts. And I understand, because we think of grief only as related to the loss of a loved one, not
Yeah,
the losses that we incur within our own
yeah,
selves,
yeah.
or our childhoods, or whatever. So I will ask the question, "What are you yearning for?
Mhm.
What are you hungry for?" Because I think that grief is about losing something that you're not going to get back. It doesn't mean that you don't create other things as a result of it and it becomes new growth. But that it's not about going back. It's about how to move forward. And so you're yearning for something that was lost that you can't get back. You're hungry to be filled in a way that you haven't been filled, or that what you have lost filled you, and you don't feel that fullness, that sense of okayness, that sense of I-ness and beingness. And it somehow feels like you're held captive and you're stuck and you just want to be liberated.
So what I'm hearing is, and correct me if I'm misinterpreting this, perhaps one of the reasons we feel loss is that we don't feel whole. Is there truth to that? Because it feels like if I felt whole and my best friend happened to die, I would miss her and be sad, but it wouldn't give me that sense of, oh, that loss and can't replace, and oh my God, what am I going to do? Because I would feel whole. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And yet, what if we are whole? What if we are innately whole, and then
Mhm.
there are aspects of us or roles that were taken as a result of those losses? So that if you lose a loved one and you were in the role of daughter and you were the only daughter to that mother, and that mother dies, I'm still a daughter, but I'm not a daughter in the same way, and I may be whole, but that role of daughter and the way that that mother responded to me as daughter has an emptiness. Does that mean that other parts of me aren't whole? No. Does it mean that I might yearn for that mother? Yes. So it's a yearning, yes, it's a
Mhm.
hunger for, but it's not all of us. It's not all of the different aspects of the self or the soul that make up us.
Mhm.
So I I think grief is deep, and it doesn't we don't escape it, right? And it's a soul's journey for sure. And there are different kinds of grief, and just like there are different types of souls journeys, and there are times within our spiritual world where everything within our spiritual world just breaks down and crushes, and that's like a kundalini awakening, and it's crushing, and we're questioning everything, and our emotions are just scattered about us, and it's messy and it's chaotic. And grief can feel like that, and it can be spiritual, but grief can also be part of a spiritual awakening, where it's like you have a renewed sense of who you are, what your goals are, how you want to show up in the world because of what you've lost. And
Mhm.
grief can then be one of your greatest teachers that becomes a feeder to a wholeness that's there and is a yes and.
Hmm. Yeah. So what about, there's so many spiritual disciplines now, and don't get me started, but they talk about, well, they don't call it spiritual bypassing, but I do when I hear people say this kind of stuff, like, well, it was meant to be, and he's in the spirit realm now, and everything is fine, and they have that kind of talk that they automatically go into, rather than, wow, this feels horrible. And yes, I know he's a spirit and I know everything's fine now and I'm going to be fine. But, what do you say to people that have that attitude of spiritual bypassing?
So can I ask you a question? Okay. So when you hear, oh, because you're a very spiritual woman, right? And you see the world through so many various lenses. So when you hear that, in the spirit world, everything is fine, How do you react?
Well, as a teacher, I gently say to them, so, but how are you feeling about all that? And I kind of lead them into getting in touch with how they really feel, giving them permission to recognize that, yes, all of that is true, but we're humans and we feel sad and we feel grief and we feel loss, and it's okay. And I take them further back to see what's being triggered further back from this experience, just like what you just did when you said, how does that bring up stuff about losing your mom?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what I do. And
Okay.
I just think it's so important because we're, like I said earlier, we hold on to that and it's affecting us. It's affecting our health. It's affecting everything to not feel
Right.
the sadness and the loss and the grief.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's what I
I
do.
Yes, yes, and I have a similar reaction and response, and one of the things that I think about when someone says, "Oh, I'm fine," and it's okay because they're in the spirit, they've moved to the spirit world, they're taken care of in the spirit world. I wanna know what they imagine about the spirit world.
Mhm.
I'd like to know who's holding them. I'd like to know what that what that holding is like as they imagine it, and and how it serves their grief to think about it in that way. And like you, I'm going to go deeper, but I also wonder and I assess for what is their capacity in terms of support systems, in terms of their ability to function, in their lives, in terms of are they living alone? Do they have kids around? Do they have friends? Do they have a spiritual connection to, you know, a church, a synagogue, a mosque, whatever it may be? Because perhaps the only way they can survive is to think they're being taken care of, and so I
Mhm.
go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in that case, what I want to do is begin to teach them some languaging that might feel safe enough initially for their nervous systems to explore other expressions. So I
Mhm.
might help them explore some nonverbal stuff. You talked about the storytelling, and I think, I love to work with stories, people's stories, and I really do believe that we have in our bodies what I call body memoirs. And those
Mhm.
body memoirs are touch points all over our body, from our brains to our mouths to our necks to our hearts to our bellies and guts, to our lower extremities, that they hold these stories, these body memoirs. And these body memoirs may be the way in to what's going on up here, because it's a very kind of heady response, and it's a disconnected response of they're in spirit, and I call it the guillotine effect. It's like we've got what's going on here, and we've got the words and we've got images, but what's going on in your body?
Mm. So
And I want the
can you give us an example of that? I mean, how what does that look when you're doing that with someone?
so let's use your example. Okay, they're being taken care of, they're in the spirit world, they're so I'm fine because they're up there. They're okay. So let's drop that down, and where that story that you've just shared, that vision, that ideal, where is that held in your body? Well, I'm holding it in my gut. Okay, so I wanna know what's going on in that gut. Is it warm? Is it nurturing? Is there love there? Who's there? Who's living there? Who's in? What are the voices in your gut? And I want to know what that experience is.
Mhm.
I want to know how your body feels socially when you're walking around and there's that loss and you're thinking they are up there. I want to know how your gut reacts with food or nurturing. I want to know how you speak to your gut if your body memoir around the loss of the loved one and that they are safe, how is your gut breathing into that my loved one is safe? And how does your gut express the missing? How does your gut express the perhaps loss of companionship? How does Are you hungry? Is your gut relaxed at night, or is there gurgling? And I want to just go into wherever that body memoir is, and I want to hear the story of, okay, so your gut is holding your loved one. Tell me a story that your gut is holding about your loved one. Did you share food? Did you let's remember peacefully, but not here, but through, let's say, the gut.
Mhm. And people are able to do that. That's great.
Well, it's guided,
Yeah.
like just like I would guide. It's not like
Mhm.
an off, okay, so now just go into your gut. It's like, I'd
Right.
like you to drop into that area where there's that body memoir of your loved one.
Mm.
Is it your heart? Is it your gut? Is it your lower back? Wherever it is, I'm going to use the body, and I'm going to ask you to tell me a story, to share a story, and sometimes there's nothing, and that's okay too. I believe that our bodies hold our grief just as much as our heads hold it. And when it's okay, my loved one is safe and they're fine. Where do you hold safety? Where do you hold that safety in your body? How do you reflect on that? And I have a notebook. It's called Notes to Self. It's Grief Notes to Self. And in the back of the notebook, I have 5 pages of words, from words around sadness, words around grief, words around love, words around connection, because we sometimes don't have the words to express accurately what's going on. And so to use that as a template, I will bring in music. I will ask my clients, bring me music that your loved one loved to listen to, or that maybe you listen to together, or food. Because though it may feel like they're safe and they're fine, there seems like there might be some cutting off of an emotional response to that which was lost.
Mhm. So, speaking of cutting off, I know I mentioned earlier that there's really no timeline for loss and grief. Everybody has their own timeline. But what about people that get so stuck in it that they never get, quote, past it? It's always just as fresh. What do you do in situations like that? How do you, without invalidating somebody and saying, just get over it, it's been 5 years, what do you do? What do you recommend? Or what are your thoughts about that?
It's such a great question, because you know and sometimes we're talking about the loss of a loved one, and I think that you are, but sometimes in my world, because I also work with trauma, and there becomes an attachment to the role of the person who is grieving whatever
Mhm.
they've lost, right? And so I must align with the attachment. I must say, okay, so I want to know as much as I can about what you walk with and what it's like for you to have grief hanging on and holding on. And it's because we don't get past it, that, which is why, like I talk about a dance. I think the goal of this work is learning how to dance with it, learning how to dance with the grief, learning how to partner with it. And sometimes you're doing the twist, and sometimes you're doing the waltz, and sometimes maybe you're just walking hand in hand. But the goal is not for it to take you over to such a degree that all you are is your grief. But if that is who you become, then I want to understand the person that is now you, that is your grief.
Mhm.
And to say, let's get over this, or let's get past this. I don't know that we do. Frankly, I don't believe in closure. I don't think that there is closure. More and more articles and papers, um, peer related articles that are done by people who are doing research in the field of grief and loss are actually writing about closure not being a thing. Like there is not a closure. The door doesn't close and lock, because when I lost Paul, I'm not going to forget. I walk around especially when I travel, with his Timex watch, and I when and it's a winding watch, and before I speak, I will often wind the watch, and I hear it tick, and I remember it on his wrist. And so, people would say, well, that's not closure because you've held on to this. To me, it's like, no, I am paying his life forward.
Mm.
And so it doesn't, I don't have to wind it every day. I don't need to hold on to him, though his essence is part of why I do the work that I do. So that loss informs me, but doesn't rule me. And as a result, so much of my identity, my personal identity, my love of life, of wanting to experience so much, is because of what I lost. And so it's not about getting past it. It's about, how am I going to learn to have it, talk about it, and move with it,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
and and so if someone is embedded so much in the grief that is who they have become, and truly their brains and their neural pathways have shifted, Royce. They have shifted so much so that they're just in the trauma of their grief, and it's complex, and it's confining, and it really kind of holds them in a captive state. But they also feel that they're being true to what they've lost. And
Mm.
so I must honor what their truth is, and help them find ways to maybe get a little breath of fresh air, or maybe see that there might be another pathway, because the labyrinth of grief, you can just like keep, like it's a maze, and it's like, no, dead end, dead end, dead end. And that's how it feels. And the goal is, oh God, I just found one path that feels like it got me closer to out. But out doesn't mean forgetting. Out doesn't mean you're all done. It just means you're walking with it a little bit differently.
Yeah. Wow, beautiful. We need to take a bit of a break, but I am talking to Edy Nathan. We're going to talk a little bit further about grief and loss and how it helps us evolve. We will be right back.
Om Times TV. Do you crave joy but feel stuck? Do you go through life feeling constantly triggered and frustrated? Fear is likely the culprit, and subconscious fear is likely sabotaging you. Perfect Life Awakening is a time-tested, spiritually based approach to inner transformation created by Royce Morales. For over 40 years, she has helped people get to the origins of subconscious fears and ultimately help them find their true purpose and a life full of joy. Sign up for Perfect Life Awakening today at roycemorales.com. You deserve to go from triggered to empowered, shifting your life with Perfect Life Awakening. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
I want to eat apples and bananas. I need to eat apples and bananas. Why can't I eat apples and bananas?
Support the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks to help provide meals to those in need. Join us at feedingamerica.org.
Welcome back. I'm talking to Edy Nathan. We're talking about grief and loss, and amazing things you're doing over there. So you talk about how feeling and going through grief and loss actually helps us evolve. And I'd love for you to talk more about that. What does that mean to you?
I think of grief like our fingerprints. It's kind of like as individual as we are, and no one grieves in exactly the same way. And grief can give us an opportunity to understand an emotional life that we may not have had privy to prior to a loss, right? It might also push us to see the world in a different way and harness our energies to become more awakened, to explore the spiritual, to have greater friendships, to let go of friendships or relationships that don't serve us. And so grief can just expand our conversations internally, expand our conversations of what we will and won't tolerate within ourselves, even in terms of how we take care of the self, how we eat, how, what we drink or don't drink, friendships, how we socialize, and being honoring the self, honoring the soul. And I think that grief can give that to us as well. There was a woman who on Long Island whose husband was fatally murdered on a Long Island Railroad train, and she ended up becoming a congresswoman and ended up making laws against guns and gun control. Had she not lost her husband, she probably wouldn't have done that. But look at what that loss turned into, something that changed the world. We look at MADD, MADD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. Those were women who lost their children, and they created something amazing that changes the world. And so we've got the potential to take the grief that wants to shoot us down and helps us sometimes to make us feel small or unable to cope or filled with malaise. And that's all part of what I call the 11 phases of grief. And there are big G's and there are little G's, and the big G's are the deaths and are the losses of self at times, or the losses of a job or a home because of a fire. And then we've got our little G's. And you know what? When those little G's, they build up, they can feel like a big G. And yet the more we learn to deal with a crisis or a little loss, and we calm our nervous systems through breath work, through music, through dance, through we know how important community is in terms of supports. And you don't have to be an extrovert to have community. You can have a community of one. And so when I think about growth, I think about all the different ways that we can grow, whether it's work or it's social or it's our spiritual realm, or it's learning, or it's deciding that we're going to quit our jobs and become an artist, or whatever the case may be. And grief can promote growth.
That's for sure. As you're talking, I'm thinking about all the stuff that's going on in the world right now. And, I think everyone to some degree is feeling loss and grief and, but a lot of people are standing up and taking action. Like you said about the woman that passed the gun law,
That's right.
That's what we're doing. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And finding maybe your true voice, finding what your voice is, because so often, we want to keep grief silent. People, it's like when they say you're over it, or God, it's been X time, it's because the friends or the family, they just want you back like you were. And the thing is that grief and loss is like a hero's journey. Something happens, you are forever changed. You're not going to go back. You are forever changed. You're going to explore. You're going, and you might look the same. You might talk the same. You might do the same work, but you're forever changed. Children who lose a parent, they're forever changed. The loss of an animal, how that animal loss was handled as a child, you're forever changed. And you may then say, I'm going to have animals when I grow up, and I'm going to take care of them, and I'm going to do it differently. And there's the repair. And so, grief is one of our greatest teachers. And sometimes it feels like a tidal wave, and we are overwhelmed, and we feel like we're drowning. And then other times it's like it's out. It's like the emotions are just bare, and we feel barren, and we feel dry, and we feel just like we feel nothing, almost like a nothing. And the goal is, I call it calibration. And I loved doing a seesaw when I was a kid. And that sense of being on a seesaw and just like, oh, both my feet are off the ground and my partner's feet are off the ground, and there we are, and we're keeping it, and then finally, like, one of us like loses the balance. But that's the goal, is to get to a calibrated state. Some people call it balance. I'm calling it calibration. And are there going to be ups and downs? Sure. But to get to that place of calibration, it's not about forgetting. It's about, how am I going to learn to remember peacefully? And everything that's going on in the world and all of the media that's coming in, it's like, how informed do you need to be? How important is that to you? And frankly, a lot that's going on can bring up the stuff that we may have forgotten or pushed down.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So just one thing, but I want you to talk about the 11 phases of grief, but just
Sure.
a comment. I find that because most of us are not really resolved or calibrated with our grief, we've suppressed it, we've denied it, we've, acted like everything is fine. When somebody else is going through grief, it triggers us because it's showing us, oh, I didn't do that, so I'm going to make sure they don't do that too. So what are your thoughts
You're
about
spot
that?
on. You're spot on. Yes.
Yeah.
We look, there's a healthy denial of grief, right?
Yeah.
There's a healthy denial of death. And that healthy denial keeps us sane, because frankly, if we were thinking about dying and death all the time, we'd all be nuts, nuttier than we already are. No insult to you. Okay. I'm responsible. I am as nutty as the next person. Okay. But truly, we do have an innate denial. And also, if we look anthropologically at our pasts, the way that we dealt with grief and loss, it was in the home. And children, from my studies so long ago, but children, little girls and boys had dolls, and sometimes they would put them, nowadays, you see these little big dolls, and the kids put them into carriages. They had coffins, and they would put their
Mm.
dolls into coffins
Huh.
because their children died.
Mm.
Mothers would have 5, 6, 7 children, and maybe 2 or 3 might pass. So it was part of the nature of their lives.
Hmm.
And so I say this because we cleaned it up. We took it out of the home, and we took the washing of the body out of the home, and it's still done in some cultures, just not necessarily here. It's still done actually here in some cultures as well. We can certainly look at indigenous cultures, and they will still very much have part of the deathing and the washing of the body and the dressing, and it is still done at home. But
Mhm.
this need to clean it up, understood, it has takes us that much further away from being in it, and adds to the the denial, if you will.
Right. Right.
And I don't wanna face it. And, you bring something really important up, because I can't tell you how many people I've worked with who've said, "We had a couple group. We had a group of people we used to hang out with, and now that my wife, my husband, my partner, my child has died, I feel like I don't know where I fit in." And
Mm.
frankly, the couple group, not always, but will often, like, just do things on their own and not be inclusive.
Mhm.
And it's perhaps their fear. God, if it happened to you, it could happen to me, and it may not even be so conscious,
Mhm.
although it
Yeah.
might be.
So we're, of course, running out of time. I always think an hour is a long time, but it gets
Right?
short. Can you
Yes.
talk about 11 phases of grief? Do you have time to kind of go through them quickly and explain what
So
they
I
are?
I think what I'd like to do, instead of just going through all of them, I'd like to start with the beginning and end with the end, and talk about a few
Okay.
things in the middle. Does that
Okay.
work for you? Okay,
Oh,
cool.
yeah, absolutely.
Great. Super. So the 11 phases are nonlinear, okay? When Elizabeth Kubler-Ross brought in her beautiful, beautiful five stages of grief, they were for the dying, they weren't really for the living, and
Mhm.
that was her research, and it was brilliant. Uh, However, it was more linear. Grief is not linear, you know that. It's nonlinear. It comes in, it goes out, and all of the emotions that we experience are layered. So I start with the first phase, and I named them only to give some kind of order to saying, God, I'm experiencing this phase and this phase and this phase, and they're all coming in together. But the first phase I actually see as standing alone. And the reason I see it standing alone, I call it the emotional armor phase. And the emotional armor phase is where numbness and denial and dysregulation occur. Okay. And the dysregulation is the loss of this of truly, like, I don't even know who I am right now. And that dysregulated state, or the numbness, or the shock, that these are all go-tos. And what they do is they actually help you to escape, to gather yourself, because numbness and that numbing is a gathering place. And I see that throughout that nonlinear experience of grief, that we will go back to the emotional armor phase to collect ourselves. And so it can feel to the person who's grieving, I'm going backwards. No, you're just spending time collecting yourself.
Mm.
And it gives them the permission to be in numbness, to revisit their dysphoria or their sense of, I don't know what I'm doing right now. And I just love the idea that the permission is given. And then all the way at the end is grace. And I think that grace is a place of calming. It's not meant as a religious piece, but it is that calibration is around you more than not. But it doesn't mean just because you get to grace and you're in an incredibly anxious state and you've been angry and that those two phases are coalescing, and then somehow you realize, I don't have to be so angry, and I can have conversations with my loved one. I can write to them. I can write to the part of myself that I've lost, and I can calm my anxiety through some breath work and through some EMDR or some self-hypnosis. And these are all tools that I teach people because I'm not the healer, they are. And that helps me get to grace. And so that non-linearity is the dance.
Mm. Oh, that's wonderful. So you mentioned before we started that you're focusing on something new, and we've got about 2 minutes to describe
Okay.
it. Tell us about the sexual grief that you were mentioning.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. So this is near and dear to my heart. What I've learned is that sometimes when people are facing a complicated grief or it's complex, that there are past traumatic imprints that have occurred that have been forgotten, and now as they're dealing with something that they really didn't want to deal with, other things that they didn't want to deal with or that their memories have protected them from begin to come out. And I'm calling this sexual grief, the sexual grief effect, which it's a natural response to something that's happened to you maybe a long time ago that hurt you physically, emotionally, and where you were touched without permission, or you saw someone touched without permission. And what I teach is what I call the liberation protocol, where you are moving from being stuck and kind of captive, which is what your grief does, and you begin to feel more liberated so that you can get to your own love. And you know what grief is about? It's about getting to your loving of the self. So the sexual grief effect is about learning about love.
Mm. It's wonderful. Well,
Thank
you
you.
have written a book, and I would love to share the cover of that book. So you might want to pull that
Yes.
up, Chris, and tell people how to reach you and how to get your book. And I think he's pulling it up right now as we speak.
Super.
There we go.
Great.
There we go.
Super. That's
Tell
the
us
book.
about that. We've got like 2 more minutes.
Okay, so this is the first book. It's Grief: The Dance of Self-Discovery Through Trauma and Loss. The artist of this cover, his name is Dave Cutler, and he always does beautiful work that has so much symbolism. And really what I see is that grief, you feel like you're on a precipice, and you know you need to take a leap of faith, but you don't know how to take that leap of faith. And that hand can be your hand, it can be the spirit hand, that can be the hand of grace, whatever it is. But I want you to have some faith that there's something that's within you and perhaps part of your community that's going to help you make that jump, that leap. And that leap is part of your own empowered self and is part of your fingerprint. And so, yes. And what also, as if you go to my website, which is edynathan.com, you'll see that I've got a course on grief, and also this sexual grief piece. There's a wonderful course through End Science, and it's all on my website. And it's the unspoken wounds. And so I think that grief can be an unspoken wound. And I think that there are things that complicate whatever healing means to you. It's not for me to define. So I look forward to meeting you. Please communicate to me via my website.
Wow.
And
Thank you so
Roy,
much.
thank you so much. This was a delicious conversation.
Well, you are delicious. And the topic is certainly important, especially right now with everything we're going through in the world.
Yes.
And we're going to get through it, and it's going to be an incredible lesson for us, as all grief is and all loss is, as you were just saying. So keep
That's
up the
right.
good work over there. And what is the website again, so people can find
It's
you?
it's EdyNathan.com. So it's my name. You can see it on the book. And you just put a .com after that. It's really straightforward. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I hope we can talk more about the sexual grief, because that sounds like a really juicy topic. And
Yes. Yes, I
thank
do
you.
too. Thank you.
And I
Thank
will see everybody next week on my next show. Thank you so much.